in a way, if you want to do budget support right, I think it's quite a labor-intensive modality. Not just the assessments that you have to do for the eligibility criteria, but also if you have variable tranches, the assessments of your performance indicators, a lot of policy dialogue, probably more than you would normally have with other aid modalities like project support. But for the actual documents to be produced during the implementation, like for the disbursement requests, I think that the new guidelines provide the simplification to make the file a little bit less bulky, really. I think the guidelines are really quite comprehensive. I think there are about 70 pages of guidelines plus all the annexes that make a document of 200 pages. You can discuss also within the House and with your counterparts, let's say, limited deviations from what is provided as sort of best practice. For example, in our case in Uganda, we have introduced specific conditions to be fulfilled for the transfer of fixed tranches, which I now learned in the training is rather unique, because normally for the fixed tranche you only do the eligibility criteria assessment. You don't have specific other preconditions, let's say. Every country is different, every sector is different, and we have the 3 different types of budget support operations. Of course it depends. If you're going to do a state and resilience building contract, is different from an SDG contract. The whole objective is different. The guidelines provide guidance for specific countries like the OCTs and small island development states, where I think the assessment, for example, for the risk management framework is slightly different from the other countries. But even for those countries where you basically accept the guidelines as they are with all the templates, I think it's the responsibility really of that delegation together with the colleagues at headquarters to see, okay, how do we make this fit to the local context, and which elements are of the most use for what we're trying to do in that country and in that sector. And I think that flexibility is provided. Well, I guess there's plenty of challenges with all aid modalities. Thinking of the policy dialogue, there's always a question of leverage in terms of how many resources you provide to the government budgets, either in the sectors or in the SDG contracts, so general budget support. What is the availability of government counterparts to really have a policy dialogue? Is that limited to a high level with the ambassador, the head of delegation, talking to ministers or permanent secretaries? Or do you actually have a continuous and comprehensive policy dialogue with your technical counterparts? So there are challenges. I think these are very contextual, so it really depends on the country and on the sector. What I think is useful beyond the guidelines and whether they're introduced in the training or not is to make use of the community of practice. So just to stay in touch with colleagues and other delegations at headquarters, if you have questions how to implement things, because not everyone also has experience with the modality. Also, I have to say, through these regional budget support meetings that I think were held in the past, but unfortunately not last year, where we would have benefited from it for our formulation. It's also good to share parts of it, at least, I think, with our government counterparts, because it explains again sort of the rationale for budget support and the principles. Why do we do budget support? What do we see in it in terms of merits? So I think that's useful to share, maybe also again with member states who are sometimes less enthusiastic about the budget support modality than in the past.